Right. Well, it's 6:31. Did you want to start?
Yep, but we have a quorum. Do we have Dave or do we need him?
We do have a quorum.
Okay, let's move forward then.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda is the review and vote the request for the fire, police, DPW facility feasibility study, which was on the list, and I can share my screen.
That'd be great, Wendy. Yeah, I'm showing that it's number 25 right now on our virtual rankings.
Can you see that?
I see your calendar right now, Wendy. So
you're showing on there.
Okay, yeah. All right, hold on.
there it is.
There it is.
So that that particular request is, it's down on the list. So that ended up being number 25, and it was originally 200,000.
So to build on that a little bit, this is something Dave Field, who's here tonight, to expand on this. If there are any questions from the committee, included, I believe, a year ago as a placeholder to start getting that into the 5-year capital improvement plan and kind of raising awareness and socializing that we would need to start engaging more seriously in facilities replacement studies for our municipal buildings. Back in 2019, before COVID, Dave had worked with the Municipal Building Committee to produce a basically desktop review of the 2014 Dora & Whittier facilities assessment, bring those prices up to a more current, at that time, standard in 2019, and make a series of recommendations as far as where the town needs to go with its facilities planning. The broad overview of that was that police, fire, and DPW need to be replaced. These facilities, with limited exception, are decades old, in some cases half a century plus old. Very similar circumstances to what many are familiar with, having heard of the condition of the elementary schools, which are being replaced right now through the MSBA process, various code compliance issues, stormwater compliance issues, buildings that are just frankly too small for these personnel and the equipment that we own and have. That's been the case for many years. And so we wanted to amend this number from a placeholder it was and move it up to 500,000 for a few reasons. One is just that the cost of everything is skyrocketing. The second is, after starting to look at this a little bit more closely with DPW, police, and fire, we wanted to ensure this was a dollar amount that would be able to get us moving in a productive direction to start doing the kind of feasibility phase of this project, which would include hiring an owner's project manager and starting to do some schematic design, as well as looking at things like different sites, because when you're looking at a potential building consolidation, there's a lot of opportunities there, which is great. But there's kind of a lot of pieces on the chessboard. So bringing someone in to start doing this work now, looking at site assessments, including particularly with fire, because the location of future stations has, bearing on service response times and things like that. So if this were to move forward now, there is currently before the Zoning Board of Appeals a friendly 40B that has an executed mitigation agreement that would provide an additional $250,000 of funding towards public works, public safety design. So the hope is that if this moves forward this fall, we get that funding moving, we can bring an OPM on, get some of the preliminary work moving. That comes spring, we would have, if that project moves forward, another $250,000 coming in to the coffers to keep that project moving productively through calendar year 22. So Dave, did I miss anything on that you want to add?
No, you summed it up quite nicely. I just want to add that, the reason for this report was the Municipal Building Committee is charged with, reviewing our building stock and updating that recommendations on an as-needed basis. In 2019, the Municipal Building Committee toured all of our buildings, really got a feel for what the condition of these buildings were, some of the functional limitations we have, the amount of maintenance that's needed in these buildings. And the overall recommendation was that we should move to replace these buildings, especially after the school project eliminated 3 of our most costly buildings in the Moreau, Parkview, and Center schools. So it was just a good opportunity at that time to, bring this forth, and so that's why we took that on.
Can I ask a question as far as the originally $200,000 requested? We've got an amendment to 300 and a remaining request at 500 here. What is the total cost of a feasibility study?
That's a good question. So, the 200,000 was probably just scratch the surface, not more building blocks that you need X amount of space. And this is what you have. This will look at where these buildings can go, what sizes we can fit on the different parcels of land, and hopefully give us a product where we can say, do we want to do a project and it's going to cost X, and this needs to go to the voters. The 200,000 would have only gotten us partway there, and we still needed more money to bring that to a schematic design where we could then have some action on it. And it was really a function of what we thought we might have been able to afford, and that's why the 200,000 was in there originally.
Right. So is there any guesstimate if we've got 250K mitigation possibly coming our way? Is a feasibility study, is this a $500,000 or $1 million project? Is this study? I'm trying to figure out, we had Mansfield that has just gone through this. Do we have any idea of what they have spent on their feasibility study, etc.?
That's an apples and oranges type of thing, because Mansfield was looking at one parcel in particular. They had previously looked at the DPW on another parcel of land, and that was voted down, and then they moved to a combined facility on their existing public works site. So it's a little different. Here we have multiple things at play, so it's really not as easy to say Mansfield spent this, so it's going to be this for us. But we do feel that, in talking to the design professionals that both I've talked to and Chief Alexander has talked to as well, that this will get us towards that path. And I'm hoping with that mitigation money of the 250,000 that Connor mentioned, that's probably going to be, we hope, enough to inform our decision of, is this a viable project and how much it's going to cost.
So a total of like 750 is what we're looking at?
That's the goal right now. That's the hope. I mean, there's still, once you start digging into things, if we start coming up with iterations of, well, we don't like this site, let's try this site, that's going to cost more money. We're hoping to narrow that down and eliminate that need, but I can't say, 750 is going to do everything we need, because we don't know. We haven't started that process, but that's the hope right now.
Yeah, Connor.
I think a good frame of reference is the elementary school construction project that's underway. The appropriation for feasibility phase, I guess we should be more clear. This is more a feasibility phase than one particular study. This could be broken into multiple deliverables, that cover things like space needs, site viability, and service response times. But the feasibility phase from schools, which included looking at properties for consolidation and the schematic design, which is really critical because that gets us closer to an understanding of what the real construction budget would cost to determine whether this is a project that we want to advance. That appropriation was roughly $1 million. And I think the actual cost came in slightly under that in the area of $750,000. So this is roughly in that ballpark. And, like I alluded to, we hope this is enough to get us moving in a direction making real progress. And then if that project comes through, that provides some other funding. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. We may need to supplement with additional design funds or something like that before we're at a point where discussion with the select board and the community about any potential debt exclusion or things like that. But
No,
this would be a very meaningful amount of money to get us to a point where we can start making kind of tangible decisions about the relative value.
Good. No, that's exactly what I was looking for. I just had no clue what we paid for that previous study. So if it came in under $1 million, that's great. When I saw a fire, DPW, police, I'm thinking, okay, Mansfield. But yes, Dave, you were 100% correct. They used their existing land to do that. But okay, yeah, no, I'm good with it. So overall, I'll let other people ask questions, and then we can move forward.
So right now we're looking for to upgrade 25 from 200 to 500. That's correct. Or are we looking to add 500 to our existing 200?
The former.
Okay, so we're looking for 500 total. We're trying to amend this to 300, another 300,000 up.
Right. Any other questions anyone has for me and Dave while you have us on this?
Yeah, I mean, as far as priorities, we've got this at 25. I heard you say you wanted to move that up. We're tapping another 300,000, so
yep.
I assume we'll have to shuffle the deck here as far as priorities.
You may not actually, and Wendy and I can get into more detail on this with your second item, but they're going to kind of bleed into each other. Our free cash we anticipate this fall is actually very healthy, over 4 million, and so we feel that we can fund nearly everything that was listed higher priority number that was not funded in spring. And the ones that we don't believe we should fund are ones that either were funded out of other available means or that have some kind of operational or grant-based reason for holding off on for now. So I mean, it is ultimately, it's up to you. It's up to the committee if you want to reshuffle the number. Kind of process perspective, you don't have to, because many of the things above this number that were not funded in the spring due to a lack of funds are going to, what we're going to recommend that we move forward with tonight.
And as far as that 4 million free cash, how has the finance committee weighed in on what they believe we need in free cash and should have on hand?
No, the town has financial management policies adopted by the select board that outline what we target for our financial management, particularly as it pertains to free cash and stabilization on hand. This would be the highest certification that we've had probably ever. So when you add our free cash and our stabilization funds together, that's how you get our reserve fund balance. So that we've been building our stabilization fund for many, many, many years as part of those, what's called a fund balance policy. And so this amount of free cash will add to the existing balance of stabilization and move the town in a much better direction on our reserves, even with this level of recommended capital spend. The total amount of capital supplement we're recommending for this fall is not actually really out of step with what you've done in the past. We're just going to lean more on free cash instead of borrowing, which is good for our long-term debt service and is, kind of the ideal situation that you would have free cash for those one-time spending items rather than borrowing.
Okay, and so we don't have to worry about bond ratings, etc., with utilizing those one-time funds.
No, to the contrary, we are not positioned for an upgrade yet, but I believe we have a credit report coming out this week related to a bond issuance for the school project where Moody's will kind of again point to in their credit rating, their reaffirmation of our credit rating that our financial management principal management team is very, and that we have been meaningfully improving our reserve position, and that is the number one item they want to see us keep making more progress on to be considered for an upgrade.
Okay,
those are great questions.
Perfect. All right, so I don't have any further questions. If anybody else?
Is the feasibility study for the shared municipal buildings, is it more complicated or less complicated than a school feasibility study?
That's a great question. Well, I've not been town administrator for a municipal building project of this size, so I don't have personal experience drawn there. Dave's done a lot of building projects, but I think it's, again, it kind of comes down to project-based specifics. There's some pros and cons. The school process, because of the MSBA grant program, has incredibly prescriptive requirements, which are, very kind of onerous to adhere to. But at least there's a rule book. It's very, very, very clear. It's extraordinarily long and puts you to sleep, but you know what you have to do. Municipal buildings, unfortunately, don't have a state grant program for public buildings. That is something that the select board, my office, Dave's office, we regularly lobby our legislators that this is something that really, really, really is needed. But unless and until that happens, there is less of a hyper prescriptive playbook for municipal buildings. We still have to follow procurement laws and things of that nature. And we will likely lean on the kind of process from school buildings because it's a good template that works. So it's less prescriptive. There are benefits of that, and there are also sometimes some challenges with that. I know that was probably the perfectly bureaucratic answer to your yes or no question, but
No, that's okay.
ask me in a year.
Yeah,
How
well,
it's going.
I was really just curious to see if the funding for the school, if it was way overstated for this project, or if they don't really know. I mean, if that was the price point that they're trying to compare to it, whether if it's a similar process or more complicated or less complicated. It seems to me like logically it would be more complicated because now you're dealing with fire and municipal needs and other factors like response times, which I guess response times to the school were it's not really applicable, but just trying to summarize it in my head is what if it makes sense or not. That's it. So.
Connor and David, what's the timeline on this project if it moves forward?
Well, I think Connor mentioned that we'd be looking to start the process, get an OPM on board, do designer selection, do the feasibility study, and then hopefully we'll be back at some point in, I'd say, either the fall of 2022 or the spring of 2023 with some action needed at that point. And from there, it's anyone's guess, but that's where I think we'd be landing.
Yeah, and I think, again, a good frame of reference for schools, feasibility funding was appropriated by town meeting in November of 2017, which is 4 years ago, and construction's underway and will wrap up at the end of next year. So you're talking 5 to 6 years on a project that's moved relatively aggressively by public construction standards from feasibility to occupation of a structure.
Just wanted to follow up to see when you'll be coming back for more fun.
If this moves forward, we'll be busy for many years.
Is there any other questions for Colin or David? Not Colin, Connor.
It's okay, happens all the time.
We still have a Colin that's way. All right, hearing none. I'd like to thank both of you for providing us the insight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next item is to actually review our capital requests and see if we have our prior items that we need to look at with you, Connor.
Sure. So on the screen that Wendy has in front of you, if you look, I believe, through item 17, everything, not everything, most things were funded at the annual town meeting. So there's a column there, column I, that shows the items that were funded. So just kind of going through them in order, the ones that were not funded in the spring, if that works for you, Harris.
Works great.
Great. So committee ranking 2, which is police, 2 marked police vehicles, annual request. We typically fund it in the fall when we know what free cash is. I would recommend we move forward at this time with that. So that's already prioritized. So unless the committee feels differently, there's no need to kind of re-vote it or.
Yep.
I'm good with that.
I'm good as well.
I think at this point too, where so many things have been either funded through town meeting or other available means, we should probably just keep the numbering as it is. And I would advocate that we just focus on the items that we recommended deferral on. So, and there's a few at the end, but we can do a list in the meantime,
Now,
not.
should we have
Right.
a motion to increase the feasible study, add an additional 300,000 for a total of 500,000, and vote on that?
Maybe that would be helpful for the record, if that's something the committee supports.
No, I don't have any more discussion. I think I asked enough questions, and I'm for it. So I'll make the recommendation if no one wants to talk about adding 300,000 to the 200 that we've already earmarked.
All right, Colin, we have a motion. Do we have a second on that?
Second?
Thank you. Now, any discussion on that? I think we had the discussion we needed to. Like that case, I will call for a vote on that. McCarthy,
Yes.
Nightingale,
Nightingale, yes?
DiNapoli, Christina, you there?
Could you hear me? DiNapoli, yes. Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me now?
Get you, thank you.
Okay.
And Murphy.
Murphy, yes.
And Blue Mulch, yes. So the vote is unanimous to raise the feasibility study from $200,000 to $500,000.
Thank you. So then, kind of building off what Wendy had suggested then, so the committee already ranked 1 through 29. The spreadsheet lists which items we are recommending, I believe, or what's a remaining request. So looking at funding the police cruisers, item 6, floor finishing, we're gonna hold off on that. We think we can hold off on that for now, and given that we're gonna be starting to expend significant funds on looking at building replacements, we're gonna stretch as much as we can with existing facilities.
So do you want that to be deferred?
Wendy, you spoke with the chief, is that, I mean, you could leave it for now. So
Yes.
under the bylaw, I don't need to fund things in perfect order. We obviously try to line
Right.
things up mostly as a team, but we're not committing any kind of faux pas or violation of the bylaw, not funding it for an operational reason.
Understood, thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. So as far as the floor refinishing, there were safety issues with holes and steel rusting and all that. Has that been mitigated so that there are no more safety issues with that floor? Or is this I can't remember if this floor refinishing was just 49,000 to epoxy the floors and make them look pretty.
I think it was the epoxy sealant. I don't know if Dave is still with us, but I believe that through other funding or municipal facilities funds that we have worked on some of those safety items.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that because I know that came up too, and I thought there was another line item for that. But if this is just the epoxy flooring, I have no problem.
David, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I believe that is the epoxy flooring. I know there are some issues with the floors, and it's something we're working on to repair in the meantime with our existing facilities funds, shorter, smaller repairs.
Yeah, I just if I remember correctly, there was something about steel popping through cracks, holes,
Yep.
etc.
Yeah, it's something we're working on now.
Okay, beautiful.
Similarly, another fire item, self-contained breathing apparatus, helmet, and boot. We're going to be pursuing grant funds or other funding sources for that.
Okay. Dave, Connie, you were breaking up, so I think you said that they're pursuing grants for that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And yes, I just pulled up the April memo, that was the Epoxy. So thank you.
Thank you.
A couple other items were funded with other available funds. And then if we start moving into item 18, which is the ADA transition plan, that's kind of annual spending. DPW spends on compliance, and they, I believe, still have the existing funds from a prior appropriation that they are working to spend. So there's no need to allocate additional funding at this time.
Okay.
And then the next handful of items, 19, 20, 21, 22, are technology-related needs across town and school government. I'm going to program and recommend that we fund all those. Those were already prioritized. 23 and 24 were funded out of other available funds. 25 is feasibility that we just discussed and you voted on, and thank you, I appreciate that. GIS planimetric update. Wendy, I think, or Dave's here as well. We're holding off on that for now.
So that's something we will always want to, budget for routine planimetric updates. We would wait until the next flyover with the USGS and piggyback off the imagery before we would go ahead and do that. So that can wait for another year or two.
Great, thank you, Dave. Item 27, so EPermitting, that's another item that was requested about a year and a half ago. So Easton, that I'm recommending that we fund at this fall. It's something that the committee already prioritized. But just by way of background, we were one of the early adopters in municipal online permitting, which almost 10 years ago now, and we haven't updated our software since then, and it shows. So we went from kind of being a leader in this area to having relatively dated software that has, it functions, but not well and not by today's standards. There are basic quality of life and administrative features, both from a user experience for our businesses and residents on the public-facing side, and then on the staff management side on the interior. That really need to be improved, including we converted from paper to electronic incrementally year over year for different departments. And so they're all actually siloed software modules that do not have a unified login. So if you're a business that has, almost any business in Easton, you're going to have to go to the planning board for something, perhaps the zoning board, or the select board, board of health. You need to have unique credentials and logins and passwords for every single one of those accounts. And that really kind of takes away from the economic development advantage of having these things be available online. On the back end, we have the same thing. Staff need to have credentials for every single account. The data is not shared as efficiently as it could be. It results in it taking longer than it needs to for permit approvals and issuances. So this is something that will be has been long needed and will help continue to make permitting more reliable and as quick as it reasonably can be, while still doing our jobs to review these things.
Great. Thank you for the overview of that again. That was helpful. The last thing I see on before defer was the flashing beacon for Turnpike.
Yes, so Turnpike is an intersection, particularly, David, I believe it's Turnpike and Purchase, and that's state controlled, that really needs major intersection improvements. And DPW will be working with Mass DOT to do some basic things that we can if they give us permission, because it's not our road. But this would really just be a Band-Aid. And there needs to be major intersection improvements there from the state. Dave, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so this was one of the recommendations of a road safety audit. There already are flashing beacons there now. They're pole mounted, ground based. One of the suggestions was that maybe an overhead would have slightly more visibility. It's a good suggestion, but we did incorporate some advanced warning signage, some flashing warning signs, some speed signs as well. And we're going to be working with the state to try to reconfigure Washington and Turnpike so that people don't just come off basically straight and have the false turn indications. We believe that's a higher priority issue than necessarily just upgrading those overhead beacons. So with limited funds, we believe that we should concentrate our efforts in other places, but it is on there because of a road safety audit, but we've done some other interim measures instead.
Thank you, David. So that brings us to everything that was approved, and everything else that is on the list has been deferred to 22.
Yeah, so the largest item here is pavement management road funding, and although we have a really healthy free cash certification anticipated, I'm not requesting that this be advanced at this time for a couple of reasons. One is that appropriations are still existing, so providing the extra funds doesn't mean we necessarily have the bandwidth or the contractors available to come do the work. And also, our delegation, specifically Majority Leader Claire Cronin, was able to secure roughly $300,000 of state earmarked funds this year that supplemented our current paving, and therefore made the state dollars came in, offsetting our local spending and making that 300 available for next year. Dave, did I miss anything on that?
No, that's accurate. Well, we should have a fairly healthy appropriation for next year with those funds that we're kind of rolling over from this year, either from savings and from that earmark. And then having another $500,000 on top of that, it probably wouldn't be easy to spend that money responsibly. It's nice to notify the utility companies ahead of time when we're going to be paving roads. So to bring like a whole year of funding forward in this coming year would probably not be the best idea. So having that $500,000 this year probably wouldn't help us. We wouldn't really be able to spend that responsibly this coming year.
Any questions or concerns on that?
No, that's good to hear that. And I understand that we also deferred a few more highway vehicles, and I know, David, that your highway vehicle program you're trying to keep it above your standards of replacement vehicles, and we haven't been able to keep up with that pace. Is there funding to take up one or two of those vehicles off the deferred and move them into a priority listing?
Yes, what I would recommend is the first two out of those three. So the 2006 F450 replacement with an F550 and the 2003 Bobcat with a skid steer. So you're looking at 200 and some odd thousand of additional.
Okay. All right, so thank you for the information. So is it possible for me to get a motion for moving the Highway F550 hook lift to ranking, if I current ranking 30, and the Bobcat to 31?
I'll make a motion to take the replacement of the 2006 450, replace with a 550 hook lift, and move that to item 30, and also replace the 2003 Bobcat with a new skid steer to item 31.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Lucas. I will now, is there any discussion? All right, I will now take a vote. Nightingale,
Nightingale, yes.
Napoli,
DiNapoli, yes.
Murphy,
Murphy, yes.
McCarthy,
Yes.
and Blumholtz, yes, as well. That vote is unanimous. So I think everything else, let's see, we already talked about Turnpike with the design piece, and that takes care of our deferred list as well. Connor, is there any other topics we need to discuss about our request summary for this year?
I don't believe so. Wendy, I think we've covered everything with the adjustments for fall.
Yes.
Okay, it's based on our discussions tonight, we do not have to make any other recommendations or votes based on our listing, since it's still within our ranking. Does anyone want to change anything on our ranking? Hearing no comments, I'm taking that as we are comfortable with our rankings as they were.
So based on the discussion, I would say that we've got the marked cruisers as a recommend. I think we're gonna, we're not gonna fund the additional 100,000 right now for municipal facilities. Recommending all the technology for town and school. Recommending the feasibility study, the permitize upgrade, and then the 2 motor equipment items for DPW, forklift and skid steer.
That's the way I see it as well. Right.
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you, Connor, for your time tonight. We really appreciate your input on this process.
Thank you. Thank you for your input as well.
All right. Our next item on our agenda is committee reorganization. One of my favorite topics. So I believe we.
Stop my screen. Okay.
Sorry, can I, is there any, Harris, would you like me to stay for anything, or?
Connor, you're more than welcome to stay. Right now, we're just going to talk about our committee reorganization, if anything's going to happen, and go over our previous minute meetings.
Well, thank you all for having me tonight, and I appreciate tremendously your support on these items, particularly feasibility. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Connor, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So Wendy, we keep the same structure? First, like chair, vice chair, etc. Is that what we're looking for?
That
again?
works for me.
Well, I don't want to be assumptuous. Is there any nominees for chair of the capital planning committee? Connor said, Colin, you want that? Are you sure? Is that a nod?
No, that was a definite no.
Okay.
I can't keep up with my regular emails. So I would make a recommend, if no one else wants to be chair, I would make a motion to have Harris continue as chair of the capital planning committee.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second that. Did we want to wait
Oh,
for
we could
vice
do
chair
all
too,
the-
or?
yeah, we could do it. We'll do them all at once. Yeah.
Okay.
Would anyone have interest in being vice chair for this committee, or do I nominate Mr. McCarthy again as my vice? Hearing no
Someone
comments.
shake their head.
I can't be both. So I make a motion that Colin McCarthy stays as vice chair for the capital planning committee, and Harris Blumwald remains chair of the capital planning committee. May I have a second? Thank you for a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. Nightingale?
Do we have to do a roll call vote for this?
Oh, I do a roll call for everything right now.
We'll just do it anyway, just
Yep.
to make sure.
I-
So